looks so shiny with this highlighter. Look at that. Hey guys, so today I am going to do that video that I was talking about in my last one about how I use celebrity charts. So I wanted to show you guys how to navigate that whole world so that if you're looking up that information for yourself, you know what you're looking for. First off, if it's like a well-known celebrity, even well-known influencers, if you just search their name in birth chart, you'll get information that pops up. Now, Google does not list things in order of quality information. Google lists things in order of popularity, a multitude of things with their algorithm. This means that you have to do a little digging. Mainly what you'll see when you look up name birth chart is Astrotheme, Astro-Charts, Astro-Charts, and Astro-Dienst, I think is how you pronounce it, I'm not sure, aka the Astrodatabank, which has all of their birth chart information. Astro-Dienst has really good, it's very reputable just website in general. So if you use astro.com and you use the chart services on there, they have a free Ephemeris. They have a ton of really good resources, really quality resources, and you should always use them to double check your own birth information or anybody's birth information when using the service of your choice. Astro-seek, Astro-Charts, Astrotheme, whatever, Cafe Astrology, whatever website you prefer for looking at charts, or if you have a software that you use, you want to compare it to Astrodatabank because most likely it's going to be correct. They have done a lot of research on when daylight savings time has been enacted for certain parts and when it's been not active for certain areas of the world. Time zones changing throughout history. Their stance on using neutral pronouns is not my favorite thing in the world. And then obviously they are the most accurate in terms of like celebrity database as well. So celebrities, historical figures, everything. They even have influencers on there. And so on the Astrodatabank part of Astro-Dienst, if that's how you pronounce it. If anybody, I think it's German, if anybody wants to let me know how you actually pronounce that. I've only ever seen it typed, never heard it said out loud, at least I don't think I have. There are a couple of things that you want to look at on this page, and I might pop up screenshots and stuff on here. Basically, the important things that you need to know is they'll have the location, the date, and with the location they'll have like the longitude and latitude and the time. And then you'll also see what's called the Rodden rating on there as well, which is basically a system created by Lois Rodden, how to classify the accuracy of birth information. And we'll talk about that later on in this video. And then if you scroll down, it gives you biography, it'll give you life events, it'll give you associates that their name's associated with. Sometimes it's kind of weird, the names that they put there. And then at the very bottom, you'll see source notes, and it'll tell you how that time has been recorded or where that time comes from or whatever. Astrotheme does this as well, slightly. So if you go on Astrotheme, they have an extensive search, and like you can search by placements. You can do a ton of awesome searches through Astrotheme. So I do like using them, but again, I always double check the information. And they do source some of their times. The times that have an actual source, not all times have a source. They will tell you where they got it from, whether it's from an article or from somebody's social media or whatever. It'll be there. You just have to, so scroll down to when you see the chart on Astrotheme and then keep scrolling, and that first sentence of the written biography thing, they'll tell you where that information is sourced from. Astro-Charts gives sometimes a name for the source that they're using. I know Tana Mojo's birth chart is on Astro-Charts with a time. It's the only birth chart of hers that has a time. It's not an Astrotheme, I don't think. And I don't even know if she's on the Astrodatabank, but... And the person that is recorded as like the source for that time is a reputable source from astro.com. You'll see him in the Astrodatabank. I think it's Victor with a K. So that makes me think that maybe her birth time is correct, but it doesn't tell you how they got that information. So they're sourcing and telling you where they got information. Where they got that information is not always the best. So Astro-Charts, I don't necessarily recommend as like your ending source, but you can use it if you like it and things like that, because some people like the way that it's set up, and it is set up really pretty. So okay, so I'm editing this right now. I was about to put in a screenshot of Tana's chart from Astro-Charts to show you what I was talking about, but they removed the time, and now her chart is untimed on Astro-Charts. And I want to know when they did this, because it was literally in like December. I just looked at my tweets of when I talked about this, that I saw it on there, where it was Victor was the person who was credited for the birth time, but now it's not there. And I always wondered why Astro-Charts would have one, but Astrodatabank wouldn't. And now I'm thinking it might have been faked, or I don't know. That's really weird. If you're Victor out there and you're watching this, can you please email me on my business email? Because I really want to know if you actually contributed this time or if they just literally use your name. That's crazy. But anyway, what Astro-Charts does now, if they do have a time, it'll say birth time accuracy, and then it'll give you like excellent or whatever. It doesn't give you the source, though, as to why they graded it excellent. I just looked at Tyler, the Creator's, because that's the example that I've been using. I looked at Tyler, the Creator's chart on there, and it says birth time excellent, which we know that it's a AA rated time, which is the best. But, again, there's no reasoning as to why that is. So I don't recommend using Astro-Charts to look up celebrity information, but if you have confirmed that the time and the chart on Astro-Charts is correct from other places, and you confirmed the source and everything, then go ahead and use the website. Like I said, it is aesthetically pleasing to look at, so, but I wouldn't use them as your first source, definitely not. So anyway, back to the video. Yeah, those are basically how I would rank those. Astro-seek, I feel like I would need to ask him, but I think he pulls his birth data from all of these different sites, I believe. When somebody is not on Astrotheme, they're not on Astrodatabank, they're not even on Astro-Charts, I go to FamousBirthdays and I look up somebody's birthday. Usually if they're like an influencer who isn't like really well known in like mainstream media. Recently, in my last video, when talking about Creepshow art, I just had to look it up on FamousBirthdays because she wasn't gonna be in any of the other places that I already mentioned. I wish their location services was better, but if you don't have a time, not having the location doesn't matter as much either. Knowing roughly what time zone, so country of origin probably, is helpful. But if you don't have somebody's time, you're already not going to have a lot of information, so location is like not as big of a deal. And usually if it is somebody who is like a smaller creator, just like a creator who doesn't have mainstream attention like Tana or something, they actually email people or their managers or whatever to get to birth info. So a lot of times it is correct, like the actual birth date. Sometimes people lie about their age, and I don't like to age shame people. So, you know, if you're lying about your birthday, I don't think it's a big deal because the industry is kind of crazy, but yeah. Anyway, I don't know why it's such a huge scandal all the time. So if I just have a birth date, whether somebody said it in a video, whether I find it on FamousBirthdays or whatever, and I don't want to pull up a chart because I don't have a time, sometimes I don't even have a location, what I do is I'll use an Ephemeris. I'm going to link a video down below about how to use an Ephemeris, if I can find one. Maybe it'll be an article. I just want something easy to tell people how to use it, and if it doesn't exist, maybe I'll just create one myself. Basically, an Ephemeris, you can get one for midnight or noon. And if you use one online, you can even use your time zone, but I think if you buy a book, like a physical Ephemeris, I think it uses UTC. Basically, it'll show you where everything is placed either on midnight of that day or noon of that day, the exact like degree and everything that everything is placed. And there's also a column to show you where the moon would be 12 hours ahead of that time. I think it's plus 12. It is on the Ephemeris that I use. And I use Ephemeris, which you can buy on the App Store. I just use that because if I'm going to be using an online Ephemeris, the Astro.com one is good, but since I'm using my phone, I would rather have an app. If I was using my computer, then I would definitely use a website and it would be free. But because I'm using my phone, I like having the app and it serves me well. So I've been using that for a couple of years now. So you'll see where the sun is that day. You'll see where the moon is at that specific time, and then I think plus 12, maybe sometimes it's plus 6, but anyway, plus 12 where it would be there, so you can see if the moon changes signs on that day, because the moon moves very quickly. Then you'll see where Mercury is that day, and Venus, and Mars, and Jupiter, and Saturn, and Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron probably for most of them, and then on Ephemeris, the app that I use, I have the asteroid goddesses as well. So like Vesta, Juno, I have those on the tail end. And I think you can buy more asteroids on Ephemeris as well. But anyway, you can see where everything was that day. So they most likely have placements that day. However, sometimes somebody will have a birthday when a planet is changing signs. This mostly happens when somebody is born close to when the sun changes signs. And then that's hard because you don't know if this public figure is like an Aries or a Pisces, for example. I know Carly and Aaron just had a video a while ago about their birth charts being done. And for a while, we didn't really know if Carly was actually an Aries or if she was a Pisces, because she was born on a day where if she was born before, I think it was like 2 a.m. or something, she could have been a Pisces. Sometimes with public figures, you don't know exactly where their sun is. Moon, again, the moon travels very quickly. The moon takes about 2.5 days in one sign. So if you're on a day where it's switching signs, you don't really know where it's going to be. And that's when it can get iffy as well. That's when you have to decide, is it this sign or this sign? I think Cody Ko, his birthday, he either has a Capricorn moon or an Aquarius moon. He's born on the day that that switches. So because we don't know a time, we don't know which one it is. Mercury, Venus, Mars most likely will be what they have. Same thing with Jupiter, Saturn, and everything. Those are way less likely to be off like that. Sometimes it can happen. Again, it just depends on the day that that person is born. I have seen a celebrity chart once. I wish I remembered who it was, but it was like their Mars could have been either or, and that was really interesting. It is less likely that you'll see that being different. And then of course, the reason why birth times are so important is because the birth time denotes the rising, which puts everything into different houses, which is very important for a lot of things. The rising changes signs about every 2 hours on average. I think it's different. In the Northern Hemisphere, Aries and Pisces are the rarest. I mean, rare is like, you know, risings are Aries and Pisces because it takes, or the rising is in there for shorter periods of time. And yeah, so obviously that's really important to get a lot of information. However, just knowing the date that somebody is born, you can gain a lot of information. And when we're working with celebrity charts, that's really the information that we need. And we'll get into the ethics later on in this video as well. So I talked about the Rodden rating earlier. I'm going to go through it right now. So the Rodden rating was created by Lois Rodden, like I said earlier, and basically it's a way to classify information. I should probably sit up. The ratings that we have is the double A, B, C, double D, X, and then double X. I'm going to go over what all of those mean. Double A is the best rating that you want. And again, you'll see Rodden rating on the astro.com, Astrodatabank stuff. Double A is the best. Double A means that somebody literally provided a birth certificate or it's some sort of official or slightly less official documentation. Like sometimes like baptism, I don't know if they're called certificates or what they're called, but sometimes the birth time will be listed on there. Scrapbooks, family scrapbooks, or photos, sometimes birth time will be listed on there. A lot of times parent memory is a little bit faulty. We'll talk about that in a second, but sometimes parents do remember like the time that was recorded on the birth certificate. So even if they don't have the birth certificate presented to them, they remember that time. Like my sister, my mom knew her birth time without having to look at her birth certificate. She just remembered it. And when my sister got her birth certificate later from her, because she needed it for something, the birth time was correct. And I made sure to look too, because I was like, I want to know if it's correct. But yeah, it was 100% correct, exactly how it was listed on the certificate. And sometimes birth certificate recording can be a little bit off just because there's a lot going on when somebody is born. It's also important to note that not everybody has birth times on their birth certificate. A lot of places don't have that. Some people don't have access to their birth certificate depending on the country that they're born. And there's ways that you can still use astrology and go around that. Maybe that's not a topic for this video, but you know, having an exact birth time is like I don't know if like saying a privilege is a good thing to say, but it is special to have like documentation that shows your exact birth time. Frank Ocean has the double A time on Astrodatabank. He actually provided his birth certificate to whoever was credited for his birth time on there. There's actually a picture of it with redacted information on Astrodatabank. He's also born in California, and California birth times are publicly accessible, but I think there's some hoops you have to jump through because A couple years ago, I tried looking at Shane Dawson's birth time, and I was like, if one wanted to go into California database and look for somebody's birth time, how they do it. And I think you have to like request it. So I don't know how easy it is to get somebody's birth time, but people who are born in California, their times are most likely correct because it is publicly accessible information. And then we have the A rating, and the A rating is basically, it's quoted by a person, family memory, things like that. So if you ask somebody, hey, what's your birth time? And they say their birth time, or if you ask your mom, hey, what time was I born? And she gives you a time. Be aware of rounding, because sometimes people will round to the 30 or to the hour. Sometimes people even round up to the fives. So that's why it's, you know, a little bit less accurate, because rounding can happen. Sometimes memory is faulty. So if you ask like what your birth time is and your mom is like, I think it was sometime between this time and this time. A ratings are also like a celebrity making a public announcement themselves. So if you ask somebody on Twitter, hey, when you were born, and they tweet you their birth time, that's considered an A rating. Again, people can lie, but you know, those all fall into the A category. So they can be useful. They're probably not perfect, but that's okay. Ariana Grande has an A rating, and the reference is her dad posting or responding back to somebody and saying the birth time that's listed on there. However, it's a little bit conflicting. I don't think it's conflicting enough to give it like a lower rating, but apparently he posted a picture of her earlier to that time, giving a different time. I think it was like something 10 or whatever, and then now it's like something 17 or like something a little bit more specific. And so fans were asking like, hey, you gave this time earlier, so is that one correct or is this new one correct? And he never answered those questions. So we're assuming, I guess, that the new time is correct because it is a little bit more specific than a rounded time, but that would be considered an A rating because it's from his memory. And then B, the B rating is for times either estimated from or taken directly from biographies or autobiographies. Sometimes with biographies and autobiographies, they can be written in a way that has like, you know, literary license where they're taking liberties with how they're describing somebody's birth. So if somebody was like, oh, it was like a dark and stormy night, right around midnight or something like that, that, you know, is a recordable time, but it's obviously not accurate to the minute or anything. And it's not like an official source because it's not a primary source. A birth certificate is a primary source. Autobiography or even a biography, well, autobiographies, I guess it depends where that person got their birth time from, if that's considered a primary source or not, because it is their birth that they're talking about. But a biography is a secondary source. Oh, and also books are not always fact-checked. I actually saw a thread on Twitter recently that books cost like $10,000+ to get fact-checked, so a lot of published books aren't even really double-checked for facts like that. So there's obviously some problems with that as well. For a B rating, what I got was Nikola Tesla, and his birth time comes from a biography that was actually written by a friend of his, so it's assumed that the birth time is pretty accurate because it's coming from a friend, but it's one of those things where sometime around midnight is when he was born, like something like that. So his birth time is midnight, but it might not be exactly midnight, but that's considered a B-rated time. C stands for cautionary. It's either if there's no direct source that they can point to, like somebody just has somebody's birth time and they have a source that doesn't source something, or they don't source where they got that from. It's also for rectified time. So rectifying your birth chart basically is taking events in your life and using different techniques to try and estimate when you were born based on the life events that you have. It's more about life events than like personality stuff, because when you have a birth time, you can do timing techniques like transits is one of them, but perfections, solar returns, zodiacal releasing. These are things that you might have heard of to predict events in your life, but you can also use them in hindsight and to look back at events that have happened in your life. It's a very long process. It's a very arduous process. And usually you want to have at least an estimated time that they can work off of. If you have no time and you try to rectify it based on somebody's life events, that's not considered a C rating. It's probably considered an X rating for not being timed. Beyonce has a C-rated chart because there's very conflicting biographical info, people writing about her. The Astro twins have done Beyonce's chart and they give her Libra rising, but again, it's not like they're providing proof of that because it's like a privacy thing, you know, unless, you know, Beyonce were to say it or like her mom was to say it or something like that, that would be a little bit more reputable. So I would also say, yeah, astrologers working with celebrities and knowing their times from that, but not necessarily publicly sharing their times, because I think the Astro twins have just shared her rising instead of like giving a time. So that would be a C rating. It's kind of similar to rectification from an estimated time, where it's like probably kind of credible, but it's more like, you know, unless somebody said it or there was a birth certificate provider or whatever, it's the best that we got. So that's C rating. And then double D stands for dirty data, which basically means that there's multiple conflicting reports as to what this person's birth time is. Some of them might be sourced, some of them might not be sourced. It could also be like if you ask your mom what your birth time is and then a couple of years later you ask her again and she's giving you different information. It's like, okay, which one do I believe? So that would be dirty data. And then for double D, we have Taylor Swift. Her birth information is very confusing. A fan site or something sources a tweet that is now deleted. Some people think that it never existed. She has never said it, and so it's given a bad rating. And also I think there are conflicting fan reports about what her birth time is. Or like different articles saying different things. And sometimes articles, they'll give like the wrong birth location, they'll give the wrong birth time. Like articles are not as trustworthy as you would think that they would be for something like that. X, like I said before, is just something that's untimed. There's really no source at all. It hasn't been released anywhere in any official channel. The person themselves hasn't said it. Their family members haven't said it. Lastly, we have the double X rating, which means that there is not even a location. So earlier when I talked about Creepshow Art not having a birth location or a birth time, that would be a double X birth chart that I pulled up for her because it doesn't have the location, it doesn't have the time. And this you would have usually just to look at like what the transits were like for that day. You can use both X and double X, but not for very complicated techniques and things like that. So now I'm gonna give you some homework and you can leave in the comments or whatever what you think their birth times would be. And I guess I'll put the answers in the description if you want to check your work. So go look up Lana Del Rey on Astrotheme and scroll down to the little section where it says where they source her birth time from. You'll see that it comes from a tweet because she corrected her birth time. And then it also shows an Instagram post from earlier where she thought she had a different birth time. And it made headlines that she changed sun signs because of the different time. So what grade would you consider that? Would you consider that a double A? Would you consider that an A? Would you consider that a B? What would you consider that? So Kanye West, there's a birth time floating around. If you go on Astrotheme and you search Kanye West, you'll see where that source is from. It is from an article. Examine that article. What kind of source do you think that is? Is it sourced to a primary source like a birth certificate or a quote from Kanye himself? And then what do you think that that time is? And then the next one that I want you to look up is Jack Black on Astrotheme. Again, scroll down to what they source as the time. And then you will see that he got his birth chart is from a birth certificate. So what kind of rating is that? Leave your answers down below and then you can check the description to see what I would rate it. This exercise that you're doing right now is what you can do all the time when you're trying to source birth information, especially if you don't have somebody on Astrodatabank, you only have the information from Astrotheme. You can make your own Rodden rating. You don't have to just rely on people who are on Astrodatabank. You can come up with that yourself. Just look at where they're sourcing it from, follow those links if you can find them, and then you can give it your own rating in your head based on that information. So that is how I find times, and that's how you judge times as well. Some times are better than others. Like I said, not having somebody's time, you can still get a lot of information that way just by looking at where the planets were that day. So yeah, untimed charts, not the worst in the world. I use a lot of untimed charts just given what I look into, but also I think the amount of timed charts would surprise you, and how official some of those times are for certain celebrities would surprise you. So if you're curious about somebody, always look up, person's name, birth chart, see if you can find any of those 3 sources that I talked about. Astro-seek is I keep saying Astro-seek. Astro-seek is another good one, just because I think it aggregates a lot of those different places. And then as long as you know how to judge the validity for yourself, works out really well. I think working with an untimed chart and being honest that it's untimed is better than trying to rectify a time yourself or using a bad time. Because, people already don't really believe in astrology, right? So if it comes out later that this person's time is different or whatever, it's not saying that, oh, it looks bad, so you're a bad astrologer because you made a bad call, because, we all make mistakes, we all do things like that. And I think thinking theoretically, like, if this was this person's time, what would it look like? It's not a bad thing. I think rectifying a celebrity's chart based on events that have happened in their life is not necessarily a bad thing. I think presenting it as true information, like this is this person's rising, is where it gets kind of iffy again, especially if you're trying to analyze the person's personality or you're analyzing their career or whatever you're doing. Being honest about what data you actually have and what data you don't have is really important. And I don't blame people for not knowing that that's not a reliable time, because you don't really know what to look for if you're not doing this all the time. When I did a thread, and I guess I'll link it below, because this is how I like to approach celebrity charts anyway. We've already seen, the video that I just did before this is an example of how I like to use celebrity charts. And also I did a thread about My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and the release of that and the impact of that and everything. And in that thread, I talk about how we don't have a time for Kanye, but I still was able to make connections between the timed My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy event chart, like the release of that, with his placements from his untimed birth chart. There's still information you can gather from there. There's still things you can do. That's why I like using events, is because it is hard data. Also, I think astrologers trying to rectify a chart for a celebrity when that celebrity is not your client is kind of problematic. It's a good exercise. It's a good way to kind of practice rectification and things like that. It's an interesting, thought process to go down. Is probably an interesting article. Let's say you title your article Finding Kanye's Birth Time, and you're going through a lot of different theories that you have and why you have those theories. I think that's a good piece of work. If you're claiming that based on all of this rectification information that I've done, this is this person's birth time, I would bet money on it, that's a little bit more problematic, especially because, like I said, not everybody knows what's good data and what's bad data. And then you can make a lot of assumptions about somebody and their life based on astrology, and it's not always going to end up in good hands. So yeah, I think it's important to just be honest about what you have. And also, somebody's public life and somebody's private life, even if a lot of their private life is public, let's say they're a family vlogger or something, it's still not 100% of their life. Even if you are honest, if somebody comes out about their mental health struggles or something that is very personal to them, it's still not all of them. You weren't there every single day that they were grieving their mother's death, for example. So there's only so much that we know about somebody's life based on their public image. I think there is more that we can gain than just the midheaven, for example. Some people are like, you only see somebody's midheaven or whatever. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I think the midheaven works more as a filter that we see the rest of the chart through. I talk about this in my readings. It's a concept that I was inspired by this book by Tracy Marks. They talk about how the rising is a filter for the rest of the chart. And I really have clung on to that, and I think that all of the angles can kind of work that way. So for celebrity, the midheaven, it's filtering the rest of them through that midheaven. The midheaven is not the only thing that we're seeing, but still, it's only one angle to how we're seeing their life. And so trying to rectify somebody's chart only using public things that happen, I think is not necessarily the best way to go about it. I've never rectified a chart before. I don't know exactly how that process goes, but I'm pretty sure you would have to look at events, all events of somebody's life, not just the public ones, because those are the biggest events, right? but minor events can also help you to rectify somebody's chart, to put the pieces of their life together. And it is very hard for a professional chart rectifier if somebody comes to them and they don't have an estimated time at all, or estimated time of day even, like if it's the afternoon, morning, whatever. It can be really, really, really difficult, if not sometimes impossible, to figure that out. And so I think a lot of the time people are oversimplifying the process of rectifying just so that they can feel like they know what somebody's chart information is and that they were smart enough to figure it out. And then also, how do you use celebrity charts in a way that's ethical? A lot of people are like, they're public figures, it's free game. I think the idea of celebrity that we have, is it like this worldwide? I know in America, at least, that's the experience that I have. It's rather ridiculous. I tweeted about this a while back too. There is just this level of invasiveness that artists of any size, from a small business to celebrities, have to deal with, and we're just expected to put up with it because that's what we signed up for. So when somebody messages a small business asking for free product so they can promote it on their Instagram when they're not even following the business page, it's just like, oh, you should just expect that that's part of the game. Or when people are showing up at like Justin Bieber's house or something, and he should just accept it because that's part of the game. Why have we normalized that? That doesn't make any sense about why Justin Bieber owes it to you to take a selfie outside of his house whenever you want. That's so invasive and weird. And I just think celebrity culture and the way that we view people in those positions is so weird. Is it because we think that we've propped this person up, we've made them famous? If they didn't have the talent, they wouldn't be famous. You know, you can argue about people's talents. That's all subjective. So yes, fandom plays a role in it, but they contributed to that as well. But I think it is like a sense of entitlement, and maybe part of it is, I don't want to say jealousy, but like I said, whether somebody's a small business selling their art online, or if they're a celebrity, people are like, this person doesn't have a regular job, so they should just expect that these random requests and the random things that happen to them should just be part of the job because they're lucky to be in the position that they're in where they can make their hobby their life's work and they can make money from that. Which I think is also a fucked up way to look at things. And it's kind of like psychology, right? If you're a psychologist, and there are a lot of like psychology people on YouTube and stuff like that like look into celebrities, influencers, and what's going on, and you know, I'll list a channel that I like down below. I really like her videos. She makes videos where she analyzes apologies, which I think is really interesting. What they always say in those videos is that, like, I'm not this person's therapist, I'm not diagnosing them, because you literally can't diagnose somebody if you're not sitting down with them. They have to make all these disclaimers, and I think it's kind of the same thing for astrology. We want to think that astrology is like this objective thing where we can just look at somebody's birth chart and we know everything about their lives. But if you haven't sat down in a client session with somebody, you don't really know their life, public figure or not, like I said. People present what they want people to see. And I think it is kind of unethical to make huge like personality assumptions or whatever based off of birth information when you don't know the person and they haven't necessarily consented to you even using that information for that purpose. Saying things like this placement in their chart is what made them this way. First of all, that's not how astrology works. As far as we know, there's no evidence to say that astrology is a causal mechanism like that. But also, how do you think other people are going to feel if they have that same configuration in their chart? You know? And a lot of people are like, oh, like, don't project, you know, your chart onto me talking about somebody else's. People are going to do that anyway, especially people who aren't as knowledgeable about astrology and how it can take on several different manifestations. It's based on that, like, yes, there are certain thematic and symbolic things that mean certain things, but then it's in like the context of your life. Not everybody is living the same life. But also, there's good people, there's bad people, there's good things that people do, whether they're good or bad, and there's bad things that people do, whether they're good or bad. The blanket assumptions I also don't really like, saying this person's midheaven shows that they can't handle criticism and like weird things like that. You don't need to use astrology to talk about why somebody is a shitty person, which I also hope is what I will express and have expressed in the video that I've done previously, and what I will express in these projects that I'm about to do. They should be out in the next month, I hope. I hope that's what I express, is that you don't need to make value judgments on somebody to use astrology in a way that's compelling. I really don't like when astrologers talk about tragedy in a way that is divested from the fact that like this is a real person and it's important to keep the humanity in astrology. There is an example that is coming to my mind that an astrologer, and they're known for doing this, when Anthony Bourdain died, immediately that day, this person pulls up his chart and the transits that he was experiencing, talking about how, oh, well, this is just like a Saturn transit or whatever. Don't let temporary things lead to permanent decisions, which is something that people say, which is a valid point to make. And maybe you're even thinking that I'm being weird in approaching this subject because you probably haven't seen it, and I don't really want to link it down below if it still exists. But believe me when I say it was not done in a way that necessarily had that message at the forefront, that don't let temporary things become permanent decisions. It was almost, it felt, and I know like it's hard to grasp that over, you know, text, but it really felt, especially because it was so immediate, it really felt like victim blaming in a way. And this astrologer has also done stuff like this around, like, you know, George Floyd being murdered last year and other things like that. And it's not everything needs to be astrologized. And if it is, it can be done in a respectful way. And my goal, like, I don't want to name people and call people up for doing this because it's something that, you know, people do casually. Like, not everybody is doing this with the intention to be malicious. There's just a way to go about things, I think. I'm a Virgo, so wording is very important to me. Maybe I'm thinking too much into this, but I think wording is very, very important. I just wanted to talk about this so you kind of know where I'm coming from with celebrity charts, why I use them the way that I use them, how I would hope that other people use them. You know, I can't control other people, but I hope this was helpful. If you have questions or anything, you can leave them in the comments. All of the links to the websites that I talked about or anything else that I mentioned will be below underneath the timestamps. You can follow me on Twitter, which is my primary presence online right now. It's where I built up the following that I have, and we're trying to do this YouTube thing now. So like I said, I have those projects coming up. We have a Gabby Hanna video coming out. That's been really rough to make. If you've seen like my tweets about the whole situation, it's very upsetting to me. And then I do have another video. We're coming up on an anniversary of the first ever Dramageddon. Yeah, I'm hoping that'll premiere like on the anniversary date. So I have some projects coming up. So yeah, any other updates, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm hoping to upload more and have more ideas. I guess if you have requests, you can leave them down below as well. If you like this video, you can like it. And if you want to see more, you can subscribe. This channel is Cheyenne/Classtrology, so I'm hoping to have some other fun videos as well. Not everything has to be astrology related, but yeah, anyway, I will see you next time. Bye.